What's up, guys? Welcome to Jaden's New Life. I'm Jaden and I'm an addict. So today I wanted to share a bit more about my story, and I want to share, especially with people that are living with fear about the future, especially when you're new in recovery. I remember my first weeks of recovery. I was really sat there and thought that quite a lot. I really sat there and thought that there was no way I was going to be able to mend any of the relationships that I've had with my family, and the people I cared about. I thought there was no going back from what I did to them all. As an addict, I absolutely betrayed every single one of the people that I knew and that were close to me. I even broke in and stole it off my grandmother. I even sold my kids' toys to get a bag that I knew that was not even going to get me high. That this fear of not being able to mend these things, and there's amends in my life today that I can't possibly make. There's amends to my mother who's passed away. I cannot make a direct amends to her, but living this way in my life as I do today, I'm making a daily amends, not only just to her, but to the people that I walked all over in my past. So a little bit of a story about my mother. A bit of a story about me. I was living in Australia. I lived there for 8 years, and I was working in the mines. And once my addiction got pretty out of hand, my wife at the time and my children moved back to New Zealand, and I told myself I didn't care. And my mother and father and both my sisters lived in Australia also. They had done before I did. I only went there for work, but it was just good that my family were there too. But what actually happened is she left and came back to New Zealand with the kids, and like I said, I didn't care, and I decided I'd started to mess up real bad, and I was looking at some time inside jail, and instead of facing it, I jumped on a plane and flew back to New Zealand. Now, 2 months after being home, I got a phone call from my father saying that my mother was diagnosed with cancer. The doctors gave her months. They said they gave her months to live, but she actually passed away 3 weeks later. Not only did I not go back and support my family and be there for my mother on her deathbed, I decided that I wouldn't go and I'd stay home. As you can tell, this is where a lot of my relationships with my family broke down big time. And instead of me going back and just facing my shit, which wasn't even that bad, and being there for my family, the addict in me just wanted to keep using. At that time when I heard of my mother's death, you would think that I would have been at my rock bottom, but unfortunately that wasn't the case at all. I carried on for another 2 years, destroying everything I knew, destroying all the relationships I had. And it took me 2 years to get to that very rocky bottom before I asked for help. So I was very lucky enough that when I was in treatment, I went through a process in there where I got to write a letter to my mother. And this letter was only a few pages long, but in the letter was things that I didn't like about my growing up, things I wanted to apologise for, things that I loved about her, pretty much a lot of things that I never got to say. And we had a bit of a ceremony, and I had about 30 people gathered around me, and we went down to the beach, and just in front of the front of the water there, and I picked up this letter, and I read it. And I tell you what, it took me probably half an hour to read. I was sobbing and bawling my eyes out. And I had the support of all these guys, fellow residents with me. And after I'd finished reading the letter, something truly amazing happened. We bent down and lit the letter on fire. And on this day, there wasn't a drop of wind. There wasn't a breath of wind, sorry. And it was a nice day. And we were watching this letter burn. And as it got to the very last bit of white paper burnt up and turned into ash. And all of a sudden, there was this little bit of wind, and the ashes just flew up into the air. And all of a sudden, it was like a cloud or something must have covered the sun, and there was just this darkness that just went out over to the sea. I've got hairs on my back even talking about that right now. And I tell you what, I've never been the same since. You know, I've never felt that guilt throughout with my mother anymore. So going back to the start of the story about this fear about making amends, you know, like you being in recovery, or someone being in recovery on a daily basis trying to better their own lives, that is a living amends. That is a living daily amends. You know, like I said, there's things that you might not be able to make direct amends for. And, you know, my advice is just to keep going where you're going if you're on this path of recovery. I know that there'll be people listening to this video too that aren't addicts and that maybe aren't in recovery, but the whole point of this is to give you guys some insights about what happens to us, you know, what happens to us addicts, and what our thought processes are, and the implications they can have on our lives. So yeah, I'll just leave that video there for today. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel down the bottom. I'm going to keep coming back on a weekly basis and share a bit of my story, and hopefully give you guys some value and some hope, and let you know that there is an amazing life to be lived in recovery if you choose to put in the effort and stick to it and be committed. So I'll leave it all there, and see you on the next video. See ya.